The air inside the Los Angeles County Courthouse felt heavy, thick with tension, thick with judgment, thick with the quiet thrill of an audience who thought they already knew exactly how the story would end. Spectators filled every row of the gallery, their whispers floating like static as they watched the young defendant standing alone beside the defense table. The table looked far too large for him. 19-year-old Jalen Dawson stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed, chin lifted only slightly, just enough to show he wasn't afraid. Accused of grand theft auto and resisting arrest, he should have looked nervous, timid, overwhelmed. But he didn't. If anything, he looked ready. Up on the bench, Judge Walter Grayson leaned back like he was settling into a movie he expected to be boring. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the polished wood, his eyes scanning Jalen over the rim of his glasses with unhidden superiority. "So," Grayson said, his lips twisting into something between a smirk and a sigh, "you think you're some kind of legal expert, do you?" The courtroom chuckled. The bailiff hid a smirk. The prosecutor snorted. Even the stenographer cracked a smile. Everyone was in on the joke. Everyone except Jalen. He didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Didn't even blink. He simply stood there, quiet, steady, like someone who'd already seen this play out in his mind 100 times. Which, in a way, he had. While other kids memorized basketball players, Jalen memorized case law. While his friends spent hours on video games, he replayed mock trials in his head, crafting arguments, interpreting statutes, predicting objections. His mother, Denise Dawson, had spent over 20 years working as a paralegal, and Jalen had grown up listening to every story, the biased judges, the lazy defense attorneys, the prosecutors who cut corners and got away with it. By 14, he could break down a trial better than most first-year law students. Not that Judge Grayson knew, or cared, about any of that. To him, Jalen was just another case file, another troubled kid, another routine afternoon. He flipped open the folder lazily. "Let's make this quick," Grayson muttered. "I have a golf game at 2. The gallery chuckled again, but this time Jalen smirked, just barely. Because Grayson had already made his first mistake. The prosecution struts in. Prosecutor Mitchell Carrington rose from his seat with the confidence of a man who had already mentally celebrated his victory. His suit was flawless, his tie perfectly knotted, his voice polished like he practiced it every morning in the mirror. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "the state will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the defendant, Jalen Dawson, was caught red-handed inside a stolen 2022 Audi A6, reported missing mere hours before his arrest." He paced toward the jury box, his shoes clicking sharply against the floor. The defendant attempted to flee from officers through downtown Los Angeles before being apprehended. His fingerprints were found on the steering wheel. The evidence speaks for itself. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. On paper, it sounded damning. Judge Grayson nodded approvingly. "Go on." Carrington grinned. He smelled the easy win. The defense may try to argue this was some kind of misunderstanding, that Mr. Dawson is simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Carrington turned toward Jalen, eyes narrowed. "But let's be honest. Innocent people don't run from the police." The atmosphere tightened. Every eye turned to the teenager. But Jalen didn't break. He was studying Carrington, observing, calculating. Waiting. Jalen makes his move. When Carrington finally wrapped up, Judge Grayson turned toward the defense table. "All right, let's hear the defense's response. Ms. Thornton." Jalen's public defender, Lisa Thornton, startled like someone waking from a nap. She stood quickly and stammered, "Your Honor, my client." Jalen placed one hand gently on her arm. She froze. He shook his head once. And sat down. Then Jalen stepped forward. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor." Silence slammed into the room. Grayson blinked. "You'll what?" "I'll be defending myself." A ripple spread through the gallery. The bailiff looked confused. Carrington laughed. But the laughter died the moment Jalen opened his mouth again. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "before we begin, I'd like to confirm something with the prosecution." Carrington raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead. You stated that Officer Daniel Ruiz personally saw me behind the wheel of the stolen vehicle, correct?" "That's right," Carrington replied. "And that's in his report?" "Of course." Jalen clasped his hands behind his back. "Then I move to dismiss that testimony." Judge Grayson frowned. "On what grounds?" Jalen stepped forward, voice level and controlled. "Because Officer Ruiz never saw me in that car at all. In fact, he wasn't even on duty when the chase began." A stunned hush fell across the courtroom. Carrington stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "I request that the court verify Officer Ruiz's GPS logs from that night," Jalen continued. "If he was where he claimed to be, the logs will prove it." He let the silence stretch. "But something tells me they won't." Whispers surged through the gallery. Judge Grayson turned slowly toward the prosecutor. "Counselor, any objections?" Carrington hesitated. It was subtle. Barely a pause. But it was enough. Everyone saw it. Everyone felt the shift. "No objections, Your Honor," he finally muttered. And that's when the courtroom stopped laughing. The case begins to unravel. Trying to recover, Carrington straightened his papers. "Regardless, Your Honor, the defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel." Jalen nodded. "That part is true." Carrington lifted his chin in satisfaction. "Too soon." "But," Jalen continued, "let's talk about what fingerprints actually prove." He turned to the jury, pacing slowly, his tone calm and deliberate. "If you walk into a department store and try on a jacket, stick your hands in the pockets, zip it up, and then hours later someone steals it, would your fingerprints mean you were the thief?" A juror leaned back. Another shifted uncomfortably. Jalen pressed on. "The car was parked outside a 7-Eleven hours before the theft. I walked past it with my friends. The door was unlocked. I leaned against it. I opened it. I touched it. But I didn't steal it. Didn't drive it. Didn't run from anything." He turned back to the judge. "And since the prosecution wants to rely on forensic evidence, I'd like to ask, did they subpoena the forensic analyst who processed the fingerprints?" Grayson glanced at Carrington. Carrington swallowed. "No. No opportunity for cross-examination." Jalen pressed. "No. No verification of the chain of custody." "No." Jalen nodded softly. "Interesting." And the courtroom crackled with tension. The kill shot. "Your Honor," Jalen said, "I'd like to enter into evidence the original statement from the owner of the stolen vehicle, Mr. Raymond Whitaker." Carrington visibly tensed. Jalen lifted a printed transcript and read clearly. "I left my car running when I ran into the gas station. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off. But it wasn't the guy they arrested. The kid I saw was white." Gasps exploded throughout the room. Jalen held the paper up. That statement was in the original police report. Yet the prosecution never mentioned it. He stepped toward the jury box. "I was arrested blocks away from where the car was abandoned, walking home with snacks. I wasn't in the vehicle. I wasn't fleeing. I wasn't even close." He let the truth sink in. "The only thing tying me to this case is bad police work and assumptions. They found a black teenager near the scene and decided that was close enough." Silence. Sharp. Icy. Uncomfortable. Grayson exhaled slowly. "Prosecution?" he asked. Carrington didn't lift his head. "Nothing further, Your Honor." Judge Grayson stared down at Jalen for a long, heavy moment. Then he spoke the words everyone would remember. "Case dismissed." Aftermath. Chaos erupted, reporters scribbling, spectators shouting, Carrington crumpling into his seat in defeat. Jalen remained still for a moment, letting the weight of the victory settle over the room. Judge Grayson watched him, something new in his eyes, recognition, and maybe regret. Jalen turned to leave. "Mr. Dawson," the judge called. Jalen paused. "You should consider law school." Jalen smirked. He didn't need to consider it. He was already on his way. Outside, reporters swarmed like a tidal wave. "Jalen, how did you know? What's next for you? Did you expect the judge to dismiss the case?" Jalen pulled his hoodie over his head and kept walking. His mother stood waiting at the bottom of the courthouse steps, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "You scared me half to death," she whispered. He grinned. "Had to take a risk, Ma." She hugged him hard, shaking her head. "You always were the stubborn one." Across the street, Judge Grayson stood by his car, watching quietly, not with contempt, but contemplation. The system had tried to break Jalen. Instead, he broke the case. And the city would remember his name. Judge Grayson stood at the edge of the sidewalk, hands clasped behind his back as he watched Jalen disappear into the crowd of reporters. The cameras followed the young man, but Grayson's eyes didn't leave him, not for a second. For the first time in years, the judge felt something tighten in his chest. Shame. Because what happened in that courtroom wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. A pattern he'd contributed to without even thinking, a pattern Jalen had just exposed in front of everyone. Grayson inhaled slowly, the weight of the realization settling on him like a heavy coat. He had underestimated that kid. No, he had dismissed him. And he had been wrong. Across the courtyard, Denise Dawson looped her arm around her son as if she still couldn't believe he was standing free in front of her. Jalen allowed it, even leaned into it, though he kept his head down to avoid the flashing cameras. As they walked, reporters shouted questions. "Jalen. Do you plan on suing the department? Do you believe racial profiling played a role? What are your next steps?" Jalen ignored them. Denise didn't. She turned sharply toward the crowd. "My son isn't a story," she snapped. "He's a person. Move." And somehow, the crowd parted. They reached their car, an old Corolla Denise had driven for a decade, and slipped inside before more cameras could swarm them. Inside the quiet, Denise exhaled shakily. "Baby, you held your own in there." She looked over at him with eyes that were still slightly wet. "You were brilliant." Jalen shrugged lightly but couldn't hide the small smile that tugged at his lips. "I just told the truth." "Yeah," Denise said softly, "but not everyone knows how to tell it so people listen." For a moment, neither of them moved. The reality of what had happened, how close things had come to going the other way, hung in the air. Finally, Denise put the key into the ignition. But before she turned it, she said something she had been holding back the entire time. "You didn't just defend yourself today, Jalen. You defended every kid who's ever been written off before they even got a chance to speak." Jalen stared out the window at the courthouse steps, still crowded, still buzzing. He didn't feel victorious. He felt something else. Purpose. Grayson makes a call. Back across the street, Judge Grayson stepped into his sedan and closed the door with a soft click. The chaos outside faded instantly. For a long moment, he sat in complete silence. Then he pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over a contact labeled Chief Delgado, LAPD. He hesitated only a second before hitting call. The line picked up quickly. "Walter. Thought you were golfing today." Grayson's jaw clenched. "I want to talk about Officer Ruiz's report," he said. Across the line, the chief went quiet. Grayson continued, his tone colder, firmer. "And the pattern of discrepancies in his last few cases. Pull his files. All of them. I'll explain later. Walter, is this about the Dawson kid? It's about the truth, Grayson snapped, surprising even himself. Just do it. He hung up before the chief could respond. For the first time in a long time, Judge Walter Grayson felt the sting of accountability, directed inward. The drive home. Denise finally pulled away from the courthouse, the old Corolla rumbling onto the main street. Jalen leaned back in the seat, staring at the city blurring past his window. She glanced at him. You okay? I'm fine. You sure? He hesitated. I didn't think winning would feel like this. Denise softened her tone. Like what? Jalen searched for the right words. Like it comes with strings attached. Denise nodded slowly. Baby, life changes the moment people realize you're gifted. The world doesn't treat geniuses the way it treats everyone else. He didn't respond. He knew she was right, but hearing it out loud made his chest tighten. Traffic crawled. Cars honked. City noise spilled through the slightly cracked window. Then Jalen's phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. He almost ignored it. But something, instinct, curiosity, made him swipe to answer. Hello. A crisp, steady voice responded. Is this Jalen Dawson? Yes. This is attorney Lila Montgomery. I watched your defense today. Jalen sat up straighter. Denise glanced at him, eyebrows raised. Montgomery continued. I run a youth legal fellowship out of UCLA Law. We'd like to offer you a meeting. Jalen blinked. Why? Because, she said, talent like yours shouldn't go unnoticed. You're the kind of mind that changes the system, Jalen. A pause. We want to help you get where you're meant to go. Jalen's heart thudded once, sharply. You interested? He swallowed. Yes, he said quietly. I'm interested. Good, Montgomery replied. Then let's get started. She hung up. Jalen lowered the phone slowly. Denise stared at him. A scholarship? Something like that, he murmured. And then, finally, a full smile spread across his face.